Hello, good morning, and thanks for joining IMR's June webinar. Industry 4.0 goes beyond technology adoption. It explores how we run our processes and engage our people. In order to deliver the biggest impact from Industry 4.0, it needs to be assessed from an application area perspective and not just a technology perspective. Presenting this morning will be IMR's Director of Analytics, Dr. Fergus Quilligan, and he's here to explain Siri, the world's first globally recognized Industry 4.0 framework, and it's supported by the World Economic Forum. Let's welcome Fergus.
Thanks, Gary, and hello and welcome everyone to today's webinar. As Gary said, it's on delivering impact from Industry 4, a business-driven approach. And this webinar is focused on the problem statement that is here that says more than 70% of companies are finding it difficult to implement and scale advanced technologies in a way that delivers significant improvement. So companies are aware of Industry 4. Companies are beginning to implement Industry 4. Some solutions are working, some are maybe not working so well, but not enough are working in a way that delivers the significant improvements that the companies are hoping for. And so the gap between awareness and implementation is usually due to companies lacking an overall Industry 4 roadmap. So the first step in terms of getting impact is you need to have a strategic roadmap. And an impactful Industry 4 strategy does not start with a technology roadmap, or even a lighthouse project, or a maturity assessment of technologies. That all comes later. It starts by assessing your entire business in terms of impact. And so often what companies do is they do maybe some small self-assessments. They might decide that they need to improve their data collection or implement some artificial intelligence or something like that. But the benefits of doing this are highly influenced not by the technology itself, but whether the application area has real bottom line impact. And when I say application area here, I'm deliberately not saying a business problem, because business problems are often quite narrow and can lead to Industry 4 use cases that are deployed in various narrow areas within a company. And then the companies completely miss out on the cumulative benefits of Industry 4 technology. And there is enormous cost to selecting an incorrect technology or an incorrect solution or application area. Industry is littered with technology investments that did not deliver that anticipated impact. And I am more often approached by companies who have been stung by this, and it's part of the reason that companies come to us for an independent view. So the World Economic Forum has acknowledged this problem of impact delivery, which is influenced by the lack of standardized approach. And it's understood that the pace of Industry 4 adoption is quite uneven across industries, but also across companies within the same industry. And companies locally and globally are still grappling with this concept of what is Industry 4, how it can benefit me, where should I start, what are my gaps today, what are my opportunities tomorrow, all those kinds of questions. So the World Economic Forum is supporting a global initiative to help companies decide how and where to apply solutions in order to maximize the benefits that they get. And this is the Smart Industry Readiness Index. It's driving an impact-led approach rather than a technology-led approach. And this is part of the World Economic Forum shaping the future of advanced manufacturing and production platform. And the data from Siri will be used in the 2022 World Economic Forum annual meeting in terms of the Manufacturing Transformation Insights Report. So what is Siri? It's the world's first quantitative framework to evaluate and benchmark manufacturing facilities. It's a suite of frameworks and tools to help manufacturers, regardless of size and industry, to start, scale, and most importantly, sustain their manufacturing transformation. And its importance lies in the fact that it helps identify focus areas that will generate the greatest value to companies, and so drives informed decision-making and effective resource allocations. So by using Siri, it helps companies by characterizing the current state of your manufacturing plants and factories, helps identify those high impact areas for improvement, and then benchmarks against industry peers as well. So the goal of this Siri program is to catalyze the adoption of Industry 4 across the global manufacturing community and to be able to provide quantitative indicators for benchmarking. So what it does is it forces you to look at all aspects of a company's performance before deciding where you would apply an Industry 4 solution. And this is because to maximize value, technology must be applied with effective processes. If you digitize a poorly designed process, that only results in a poorly designed digital process. And we've seen many cases also where you might have a superb technical solution, but it has been completely undermined if the right organizational behaviors are not behind it. So it is important to look across all the aspects of the business. And Siri in particular puts this into 3 building blocks of process, technology, and organization, which I'll just spend a moment going into in a little bit more detail. So when you look at these 16 dimensions that Siri breaks down the organizational capabilities into, if you look at the process block, it splits it into looking at your operations through your vertical integration. So this is the integration of the processes and systems within your facility that would establish a connected end-to-end thread. So this can start with things like standard operating procedures. It could be how your OT and IT systems communicate. It could be whether it makes sense or not to get an ERP or how you use it or an MES system, right up to advanced planning and scheduling. Looking at horizontal integration, it's the integration of your enterprise processes across the organization and with stakeholders along your value chain. So this is looking at your purchasing, your logistics, and your supply chain. When you look at integrated product lifecycle, it's the integration of your people, processes, and systems along the entire product lifecycle. So that's looking at your design and development, your engineering, your production, how your customers are using it, how the service and disposal works. So your PLM aspects there. From a technology side, we look at a number of things. So first, from a technology side, we look at automation, which is the application of technology to kind of monitor, control, execute the processes in question. But we look at that across a number of different application areas. So you're looking at how that might work on a shop floor, how that might work for automating your enterprise processes, and also how it might work to automate your facilities processes. From a connectivity perspective, we're looking at the interconnection of equipment and machines and any computer-based systems that enable the communication and seamless data exchange within, again, across your shop floor, enterprise, and facility. And from an intelligence point of view, we look at the processing and the analysis of data to optimize the existing processes. And then what's very important is looking from an organizational point of view. We're looking at the programs that companies have in place to help develop the workforce capabilities, their skills and competencies. We look at the readiness of the management team to leverage the latest trends and technologies. We also look at the processes in place to help the company work together through cross-functional teams and with external partners, and also the ability of the organization to design and execute a plan of action to achieve a set of long-term goals. So that's about prioritization, about formulating a roadmap, about developing a system of rules and processes that will translate that vision into business value. And there are bands of these for each dimension that you can be scored against. And the goal for this is to accurately assess where most of your company is, and that helps you then define an impactful path forward. So what is really different about Siri, though, is that it guides companies to the most impactful way to implement Industry 4.0. And to do that, it uses a number of frameworks, but one of particular relevance to what I'm talking about today is the tier framework. And this is used for the prioritization matrix. It is essentially a management planning tool that assists companies to identify the high priority areas in which improvements will bring the most benefit. And this has 4 key principles of prioritization. So it looks at your today's state, that's developing an in-depth understanding of your current Industry 4 maturity level. It's looking at the impact to the bottom line. That's analyzing how your costs, your revenue, and all your financial information can identify those aspects of your company that can generate the greatest financial return. It's also looking at your essential business objectives, the key KPIs, the differentiators you have for your business in the marketplace, and use that to guide the selection of relevant Industry 4 areas, as well as references to the broader community. And this is basically learning from the successes and the mistakes of your peers and other companies in the global community. So if I look through them just one by one briefly, when you start with T, which is looking at today's state, it starts off with, I would say, an education aspect around what Industry 4 is and how it can help, as well as that in-depth understanding of your Industry 4 maturity. So it looks through the 16 dimensions there, and as part of an assessment, you can measure yourself against those dimensions. And if you look at this small portion of Siri, this is what would be in what you sometimes see in those the I4 maturity models that you might see online or some free available versions, it's usually a light version of something like this portion, where you get some kind of sense of where you are based on some fixed dimensions. So what Siri then does for costs and KPIs, it examines the areas of the company and the areas of improvement that would deliver the most impact to the bottom line. So to do that, it uses tools such as degrees of relevance tables that are based off assessments across hundreds of companies to help connect the application areas for Industry 4 to your key costs and KPIs. So let me give you an example of that. So if you work in a company that, let's say, has high labor costs or high maintenance costs, TIER will then guide you towards improving things like your vertical integration process, or a technology like shop floor automation or workforce training, as these aspects are the aspects that ensure that you get maximum value from your biggest cost. However, if your costs are, let's say, high in aftermarket services or transportation or something like that, then it would point towards something like enterprise level intelligence, because that will yield a far bigger bottom line for that kind of costs. So you might still be investing in connectivity and intelligence, but it will be applying that at enterprise level, getting your systems talking to each other rather than your machines talking to each other. So depending on the cost profile of your company, that will really impact the type of benefits you can get from these kind of technologies. Similarly, if something like raw materials or consumables were a high cost for you, you'd be looking at much more like your horizontal integration or your enterprise intelligence. So Siri uses this aspect of the TIER framework to ensure that the application areas identified align with the maximized financial returns for your company. Similarly, we examine the key business objectives and ensure that those in the application areas are being prioritized for Industry 4, that they align with the key objectives of the company. So you'd hope to see that some of these would align with the cost data, that if your utilities costs are high, you would hope then that you would have metrics around things like utility efficiency. But this also brings in other aspects that may not be related to cost. So if time to delivery or if production flexibility is really key to your business, then again, it highlights things like your vertical integration that will be very important to you, or technologies like shop floor intelligence, or it might highlight that you need a very adaptive workforce to be able to deliver on the key KPI that's important to you. So again, this is about highlighting your key business differentiators and needs and ensuring that when you create your Industry 4 roadmap, that it supports the key capabilities for you and for your business. It also looks at referencing the broader community here. So in the middle there, you can see a comparison with manufacturing as a whole. So there's reference points there of what it means for a factory to be best in class or in the broad middle or in the bottom performers. We do recognize that the state of transformation can be highly industry specific. So there are industry specific benchmarks as well across those industry components you see there in the bottom left. And then there are also, it also characterizes the 4 main types of transformation profiles that a manufacturing industry might follow. That's based on both the maturity and the variance of the transformation within that industry. So you do see a very different transformation profile if you look at, let's say, the food and beverage industry versus pharmaceuticals or something like that. So it enables you to characterize that as well. And what you do then is you take all that information from that TIER prioritization work, and you can combine that with a planning horizon information. So this is looking at, as a business, are you looking at the next 3 to 6 months? Are you looking at trying to get some early wins to get your Industry 4 roadmap up and running? Or is it already up and running and you're beginning to look at a 3 to 5 year strategic plan? And by combining these inputs from your TIER framework with your planning horizon, the Siri prioritization matrix then selects areas of focus for you that will give you the highest impact value. And so once you have identified these high impact areas, now the company can begin to assess how do you increase your maturity, knowing that you're now focusing on high impact dimensions. And the Siri assessment tool lays out a path of capabilities for each dimension. And the expert assessors who complete this assessment are also then able to point towards likely solutions to deliver on the goals in the identified high impact areas. And all of IMOR's assessors in this area have more than 20 years industrial experience to help guide you through that process. So what is the process for doing this? The process for an assessment is as follows. It starts with an onboarding call, which is a call to key personnel to discuss the process, to set the scene. It explains what's going to go on, it shares relevant materials, and it goes through the information that will need to be shared. Stage 2 is a 1.5 to 2 day workshop that's on site. And this is the real depth of the evaluation of your site. And it needs senior executives or senior directors to be on board with that, to be able to enable that to be done accurately. That's about going through the dimensions that are key to your facility, making sure they're scored, collecting all the inputs for prioritization. So this is looking at your cost information, looking at your KPI information, looking at your planning horizon. And after that, then there is a half a day debrief where the assessor brings in their recommendations and helps interpret the findings and drive specific solution implementation and technology roadmaps that would address those high impact areas. And so end to end, that should take approximately a 4-week period. And at the end of that 4-week period, you do then get also an official Siri assessment report that will include the current state of your facility, the prioritized area for improvement and the plans to move them forward, and the benchmarking against your industry peers. So what I also want to show here is examples of what benefits are possible when Industry 4 is implemented well. So we often talk about situations where people do not implement it well, but here is where you're looking across a range of business KPIs that are not just cost related, but also growth related. And you can see double-digit, sometimes even triple-digit benefits. And this is World Economic Forum data from their Lighthouse program, where early adopters provide exemplars for other organizations to follow. And while you kind of might assume sometimes that this kind of transformation comes at exorbitant cost, the lighthouses are actually showing that if you implement the right Industry 4 implementation strategy in the right application area, they're actually excellent returns on investment if it is done correctly. So there is a Siri internationalization program in place. The objective of that is to proliferate the global adoption of Siri as a single internationally recognized set of frameworks and tools for the manufacturing community to use and to help evaluate and benchmark their facilities. It did start in Asia. It was started initially by the EDB in Singapore. It is used extensively in Southeast Asia and in China. Siemens, McKinsey, TÜV Sud, Schneider are all using this in Germany, so it's become very big in Germany as well. It's also used in America. It's been rolled out in New Zealand recently, so it is becoming a ubiquitous tool in the international community. And as I mentioned earlier, this is part of the World Economic Forum's goal to shape the future of advanced manufacturing and production. And this data is going to be used to inform the World Economic Forum around company needs through the publication of the findings at the 2022 annual meeting in Davos for the World Economic Forum. So I do sometimes often look at those reports myself, and companies, I think, often wonder how other companies get their data represented in reports such as this. And this is the answer. Engaging in programs such as this is how you get your data and your needs into the global reports that are put in front of the influencers. So just to mention in terms of the assessors for Siri, so all IMOR assessors are highly experienced, all 20 years experience plus. We've all completed a formal training program and exam, and so we're formally qualified independent individuals that are able to professionally assess a manufacturing facility. Our assessors are, there's myself, I'm Fergus Quilligan, I'm the Director of Analytics in IMOR. There's Niall Loughney, who's the Director of the International Things Group in IMOR, and Adrian Hollenden, who's an industrial solutions architect. So just want to show here also some feedback from companies that have already engaged with Siri. And so what I want to show the breadth of companies that have engaged. So from, let's say, a Silicon Valley company like Coherent in the States, they've mentioned that the Siri assessment helped them better understand the current state of their facility and how it compared to the rest of the industry. Also to European manufacturers like Infineon, who mentioned that it is essential to ensure that the organizational element is not neglected, but rather given equally or even greater attention in any major transformation. It's also used from the large European solution providers, such as Siemens, who mentioned that the tier framework helps ensure that all critical considerations are assessed, guiding companies to target the high impact areas. But also, I just want to mention that it has been used extensively by SMEs. And here is a testimonial also from an Asian precision engineering SME that mentions, as a medium-sized enterprise with limited resources, it's especially important that we invest our time and effort in the right areas. The prioritization matrix is a valuable tool because it highlights the high impact areas that we should focus on for our Industry 4 plans. So to close, just to say, IMOR's mandate is to demystify, de-risk, and deliver technology for Irish manufacturing. We have embraced Siri because after assessing a large number of assessment tools around the globe, we judged that Siri was the best placed tool to address the key challenge facing Irish manufacturing, which is delivering business impact with Industry 4. And as we say, companies want to make the right choices. Wrong choices can be very, very expensive. Hundreds of companies have already used the Siri assessment across all geographies, sectors, and sizes in order to define an impactful Industry 4 implementation plan. And we are now the first organization in the UK and Ireland to have qualified Siri assessors and make this offering, which is available now. I will say we do have some limited early adopter incentives in place. And as always, IMOR are there to offer technology agnostic advice for road mapping and solutions. So with that, I will close. I would say if you're interested or want to contact us afterwards, we can be contacted at siri@imor.ie. But for now, I will hand back to Gary if there are any questions, and thank you.
Thanks, Fergus. That's great stuff. Yeah, I'm also going to bring in Niall and Adrian now for the questions and answers. So welcome, Niall and Adrian. And the first question I'm going to give to you, Niall. There are a lot of offerings out there supporting Industry 4.0. What's different about Siri?
So it's a good question. So, I mean, one of the challenges we've seen in IMR is, as Fergus has said, is the difficulty in implementing and scaling advanced technologies in the right way to get the right ROI and KPI impact. And as Fergus has said, McKinsey and several other third-party companies have observed that as well. I mean, the bottom line is the Siri approach focuses on impact through the deployment of a suite of frameworks that's specifically designed to help manufacturers, regardless of size and industry. And the goal with this is to catalyze the adoption of Industry 4 methodologies and technologies. And how Siri does that is it targets 3 specific areas. And by taking an official Siri assessment with us, you get to characterize your current state in your factory. And that's very important to understanding how you improve based on where you currently are. Secondly, it identifies high impact areas through the tier framework that Fergus has mentioned. So it's very clinical in terms of identifying those areas for improvement. And thirdly, it gives companies a unique insight into how they're performing with respect to their own industry peers or types of companies similar to them across the globe. And also, both from an specific industry perspective, but also from a more global distribution of companies as well. So there would be the 3 key points as to why Siri would be different.
Great, thanks, Niall. Adrian, this one's for you. Are the frameworks and tools applicable to all companies, regardless of the size and industry?
Morning, folks. Yeah, great question, Gary. Absolutely, the frameworks and tools have been developed to address all sizes of companies, whether they're SMEs or multinationals or mid-caps, and also regardless of industry. We have broken the industry groups down to 14 different groups, from food and beverage, pharmaceuticals, but right across manufacturing industry. And another point to note is that of all the assessments that have been done to date, about 50% of them have been done by SMEs. So it's not exclusive for the larger multinational or larger organizations. And really the purpose of utilizing the frameworks and tools is that companies are encouraged to take those deeper dives into specific areas that are aligned to their own needs. And that's what the Siri impact areas identifies, those areas where the deeper dives can be taken.
Thanks, Adrian. Fergus, this one's back for you. If my company scored very low in most or all areas in the assessment, is it possible that we aren't ready for Industry 4? So basically, is there a scenario where a company might not be ready to adopt Industry 4.0?
Not really, no. What the assessment portion is just telling you is what is your current state. I would say every company has the potential for transformation. I would also say if you're a little bit eagle-eyed on some of those earlier slides, you could see the scales go from 0 to 5. But the best in class, if you look at the average cross manufacturing, is normally somewhere around 2 or 3. Everyone isn't up there at 4 or 5, and that also varies by industry. So some industries have higher benchmarks, others are lower. And the other thing I would say is this is an assessment. It's not an audit where your goal is to score as highly as you can. It is an assessment that helps you understand really where you are so that you can actually identify the right impactful next step. So it's not, the goal isn't to score as high as you can. It's to just do it right and get yourself some impact on the next phase.
Thanks, Fergus. And Niall, again, what are the biggest gaps, or where are the most notable gaps noticed from these assessments?
So that's an interesting question. So I mean, there have, as Fergus has mentioned, there's been an extensive use of this in particular regions across the globe, and what's coming out from that is, the biggest gaps appear to be coming in the connectivity pillar. So how assets within factories connect and transfer data. So a common school of thought that folks on the line would know is that automation forms the basis, for any industrial transformation. However, in a digital age where, people talk about data as the new oil, connectivity has become even more critical. So with that in mind, a highly connected factory where assets, by that we mean machines, products, materials, and labor are linked via a common or appropriate networks or subnetworks. It's only through that will we enable more extensive and effective machine-to-machine and human-to-machine communication. And that's the I suppose the area that seems to be evolving as the biggest gap that are seen in companies right now.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Thanks again, Fergus, for the insightful presentation, and thanks to Adrian and Niall for answering the questions. For any more info or questions about Siri, or if you're interested in learning more about the Early Adopter Incentive, please email siri@imr.ie. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button in the corner for more IMR videos on how we demystify, de-risk, and deliver emerging technologies for advanced manufacturing.